Brenda, a 28-year-old waitress, worked at LA's Cafe, a small, cozy coffee shop tucked away in a quiet part of town. Every evening, the place remained tranquil, frequented mostly by retired locals who sipped their coffee, shared stories, and reminisced about the past. For Brenda, the cafe was a peaceful retreat, familiar, slow-paced, and occasionally surprising. But tonight, just before closing, that familiar rhythm was about to be disrupted. The soft chime of the doorbell rang, drawing her attention. As she glanced up, she froze for a brief moment. Walking into the cafe was someone she had never imagined seeing in person. Barack Obama. The former president of the United States entered as if he were any other customer. His presence immediately caught the attention of everyone inside, even the regulars who had long settled into their seats. Brenda's heart pounded. She had seen him countless times on television, in interviews, and across social media. Yet now, he was sitting just a few feet away. He looked a little weary but carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had borne the weight of the world. Choosing a small table by the window, he gazed outside, lost in thought. Brenda took a deep breath and composed herself, proceeding to serve him a black coffee and a slice of pie. As she placed the items on the table, she noticed something in his expression, an air of contemplation, a quiet heaviness. In that moment, she felt an unexpected sense of empathy. No matter who he was, everyone needed a place to sit and reflect. From behind the counter, she stole occasional glances at him, quietly admiring the man he was and the history he had shaped. However, not everyone in the cafe shared her sentiments. An older gentleman, Frank, known for his blunt opinions, rose from his seat and walked toward Obama's table. Brenda tensed as the older man addressed him, his tone carrying a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Though she couldn't hear every word, she sensed the weight behind them. Frank questioned why Obama was there, why someone who once held so much power would simply sit in a small cafe like an ordinary person. The former president, however, responded with his usual composure, explaining that true change did not stem from one individual alone, it came from communities, from the small but meaningful acts that people did for one another. A hush fell over the room. Those who had been quietly observing seemed to be reflecting on his words. Brenda felt a heaviness settle in her chest. She could not remain silent. Stepping forward, she spoke calmly but firmly, reminding everyone that Obama had never stopped serving the community. Through his foundation, mentorship programs, and education initiatives, he continued to make a difference. His presence here was not about seeking attention but about the simple truth that change was not tied to a title. It was about the work one continued to do, no matter how small. A quiet understanding seemed to settle over the cafe. Obama gave her a small nod of appreciation. As the evening went on, the cafe gradually returned to its usual rhythm. Yet, something had shifted. A conversation had been sparked, one that would linger long after the coffee cups were emptied. The atmosphere in the cafe grew heavier after Brenda spoke up in defense of Barack Obama. The regulars, once absorbed in their quiet conversations, now turned their gazes toward him, skepticism evident in their eyes. Near the window, a middle-aged man in a worn leather jacket slowly rose from his seat. Under the dim lighting, his silver hair gleamed with a cold sheen. His name was Gerald, a man well known in the neighborhood for his extreme views. From the very first day Obama took office, he had never liked him. And now, his sharp gaze locked onto the former president, filled with unmistakable disdain. The weight of his words cut through the room, dripping with sarcasm and resentment. He made no effort to hide his contempt as he spoke of Obama's past decisions, ones he believed had thrown the country into disarray. The air in the cafe grew tense, as if each word chipped away at the fragile sense of calm that had once existed there. Brenda felt the pressure thickening, the space tightening around them like a brewing storm. She held her breath, waiting for Obama's response, hoping he wouldn't be drawn into the provocation. But Obama remained composed. He set his coffee cup down with deliberate ease, his expression unwavering. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no anger, only certainty. He knew that change never came without resistance, and he had long accepted that. Gerald, however, was not satisfied. He took a step closer, his voice laced with bitterness, his words an open attack. He refused to see reason, unwilling to accept any justification. To him, it was all failure, one mistake after another. Inside the cafe, no one spoke. Some customers sat frozen, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unwilling to intervene. But Obama remained unshaken. His steady gaze met Gerald's, calm yet resolute. There was no need for heated debate, no need to defend himself with anger. He understood that not everyone would see the world as he did. His goal had always been to create a fair and just society, even if not everyone believed in his vision. Gerald eventually turned away, retreating to his seat, though his dissatisfaction still lingered in the air. Then, another man stood up. Mark, a man of few words, but when he did speak, his voice carried weight. He had grown up in the suburbs, a place where faces like his were the only ones seen, where conversations about Obama had always leaned in one direction. And now, as he stepped forward, his stance made it clear that he, too, held no sympathy for the man before him. His words were quieter than Gerald's, but no less heavy. His tone carried the same resentment, the same disbelief that Obama would dare show his face in a place like this. But once again, Obama did not react immediately. He listened. And when he finally responded, it was not with rebuttals or arguments but with patience. He acknowledged Mark's perspective, as he always had with those who opposed him. He never intended for anyone to feel left behind, and every decision he made was aimed at providing equal opportunities. But he understood that not everyone would see it that way, and he would not force them to. Mark scoffed, his disbelief evident. To him, the country was more divided than ever, torn apart by riots, by identity politics, by the very policies Obama had championed. In his eyes, the former president was responsible for the fractures in the nation. Silence fell over the cafe. The weight of that accusation lingered, thick and suffocating. Some customers shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to take a stance, unwilling to speak up. Brenda glanced at Obama, wondering how he would respond to such a heavy-handed charge. But he did not flinch. His sigh was not one of frustration but of reflection. There was no exhaustion in his face, no sign of irritation, only thoughtfulness. He did not deny the hardships, nor did he try to erase the past. Instead, he reminded Mark of a simple truth: change did not rest in the hands of one person alone. If the country needed to move forward, then everyone had a role to play in that progress. Mark did not reply. Perhaps because there was nothing left to say. A hush spread through the room. Some of the customers, though silent, began to see Obama differently, to recognize the weight he carried, the patience he exhibited, the way he refused to harden under scrutiny. Brenda watched him closely, a quiet admiration stirring within her. It was never easy to stand firm in the face of criticism, to weather the storm without wavering. But that was who he was. That was why he had made history. As the tension in the cafe finally began to ease, Obama stood up, ready to leave. He glanced around the room, offering a small, knowing smile. Before stepping away, he turned to Brenda and gave a nod of acknowledgement. Though perspectives might differ, he still believed that real change could only come through collective effort. And with that, he stepped out into the night. Inside the cafe, those left behind sat with their thoughts, the echoes of his presence lingering long after he was gone. The following day, the atmosphere in LA's cafe was heavy and cold. Brenda entered with a heavy heart, burdened by anxiety, knowing that she would have to face the consequences of her actions. As she stepped inside, the manager, Mr. Smith, was already waiting for her at the counter. His stern expression made her chest tighten with unease. Without much hesitation, he led her into the office. The quiet space felt emptier than usual, the sound of their footsteps echoing ominously. Brenda hardly needed an explanation. Deep down, she already knew what was coming. As he gestured for her to sit, the weight of inevitability settled over her. Mr. Smith delivered the news with a firm, emotionless tone. Her employment at the cafe had to come to an end. The incident from the previous night had crossed a line, and the establishment could not afford conflicts with long-standing customers. No amount of justification would change the decision. Though she had acted out of a sense of justice, there was no room for such defiance in a place that prioritized maintaining harmony over confrontation. The words struck her deeply. LA's cafe had been more than just a workplace, it had been a second home. The people there had felt like family, and now, that connection was being severed in a way she had never anticipated. With no argument left to make, she left the office, the weight of loss pressing heavily upon her. As she moved back toward the coffee station, the chime of the entrance bell rang through the cafe. She looked up, and to her astonishment, a familiar figure stepped inside. It was none other than Barack Obama. He stood with a calm presence, hands in his pockets, his gaze scanning the room as if searching for something. The moment he spotted her, his expression shifted, as though sensing that something was amiss. Approaching her with his characteristic warmth, he spoke, his voice tinged with concern. Though Brenda tried to respond with a smile, the pain of recent events made it difficult to mask her emotions. Obama had already heard about what had happened. Rather than disappointment, he expressed admiration for her courage. He understood why she had taken a stand and reassured her that standing up for one's beliefs, despite the consequences, was a difficult yet necessary act. His words, filled with sincerity, carried a weight that Brenda had not expected. He spoke not as a distant public figure, but as someone who recognized her actions and respected them. To her astonishment, he offered her a new opportunity, a position at the Obama Foundation. He believed in her potential and wanted to help her grow. The offer was almost too incredible to believe. Just hours earlier, she had lost a job she cherished, and now, she was being presented with a path she had never imagined. As the realization sank in, gratitude overwhelmed her. Life had taken an unexpected turn, proving that moments of hardship could lead to unforeseen possibilities. Accepting the offer, she embarked on a new chapter, filled with hope and determination. Brenda would always remember the lesson that day. Sometimes, the smallest acts of courage could open the door to the greatest opportunities.